Spiritual protection in the digital age. We finished last time with thinking through the dangers of the internet, just walking through the various ideas of how it is that the internet is dangerous. Illuminating our minds to these things, we recognize that everything has a measure of danger to it. I'm all untucked and everything from drywall dust all over me. So, but everything has a bit of an element of danger to it. Any interaction is going to come with spiritual pitfalls as it relates to pride and the like. But we talked about the various ways in which the internet poses this risk. Of course, we all think of pornography and the danger that comes from the indecency and the immodesty and the sexual perversions found very easily and accessibly online, where it's all able to be done from the comfort of your own home in the darkness, no direct risk of public exposure except to the extent that you place yourself at that risk through a paper trail and the like. But then we also talked about the dangers as it related to two other areas. So we talked about pornography. What were the two other primary areas of danger that we talked about? Or one of those two? Social media was one, right? The elements of social media. And that when you're on this interactive board of people who are posting online and interacting with one another online, it opens up a vast trove of dangers, not just in the area of pornography, which is one of them, but in the areas of pride, in the areas of anger, in the areas of gossip, the various aspects of getting caught up in even the 24-hour news cycle where your spirit is constantly outside of rest, although that's kind of that third category that we haven't, that we talked about that you haven't given me yet. So the dangers of social media, the need to constantly be comparing ourselves to others, the need to have regular affirmation of what I'm thinking or what I'm doing, even so much so that I get upset if the picture of my lunch does not have enough likes. You say, well, that's absurd. It may be absurd, but it's a real thing. So we have the danger of pornography, the danger of social media. The third one was? James? Consumption. That this thing begins to rule your life. That you live on the internet. That every ding, every beep, every vibrate, and you have to be on your phone. That you have to know what's happening. That's kind of the 24-hour news cycle danger as well. That you are constantly needing to be in the loop as to what's happening, and a lot of that connects to social media. Who's posted what in the last 20 minutes, in the last hour, in the last few hours. So you're on your phone. You're not engaged with the people that are around you. Children don't see their parents interacting with them. They see their parents interacting with people online, whether that's friends or strangers. Giving time that you would otherwise give to children, to friends, to family, to people in your community, and instead you're investing that time in faceless, nameless people online. The idea of consumption as it relates to watching videos. YouTube, going down the YouTube rabbit hole and ending up 3 or 4 hours invested in cat videos, right? Or on social media, 3 or 4 hours invested in cat memes. And so we have this danger of consumption whereby this thing threatens to consume our lives. And if you give it 2 hours of every day, that's 1/12 of your day. And if you look at statistics, of course, many young people are on their phones or on a digital device, be that, I didn't even talk about the internet as it relates to video games, but they'll spend 4 or 5 hours, 6 hours a day on various aspects of these digital mediums interacting online. And that has created online addiction where we have a generation with Gen Z and then further down the line who are truly addicted to their phones, where they cannot be without them, where they get anxiety if they are not connected at all times. This is something different. This is something new. The ability to just sit and meditate, even as we do before and after our service, the preparation and the sila, is there an ability for one's mind to slow down and to still itself enough to hear the Lord, to meditate on the things of God? Or are our minds so perpetually running that we cannot do such things? And the internet has a lot to do with that. So this week we're on to the principles. And as we said, the internet is an amazing tool, but out of control, it serves almost exclusively to amplify the worst elements of human nature. When it is harnessed, it can be harnessed for good. We have missionaries that we support. We have one missionary that's full-time digital evangelism. That's Missionary Bergman. We have another missionary, Missionary Giltner in Japan, who his ministry is very, very slow in growth. Japan is a very hard field to reach. And so his work in the physical realm of the people is slow, but then he's able to spend extra time online with online evangelism, both through social media, and they have seen tremendous amounts of fruit. Then we had Brother Harding, who came a little while ago, and he designs smartphone apps for missionaries for the sake of helping missionaries, particularly those that don't have written languages, be able to use the phone to translate into a verbal language, and then to help people then understand the Word of God through there. So amazing tools that exist when it's harnessed. But the problem is that the world doesn't really harness things. The world is not engaged as a general rule in control, self-control. Men do what is right in their own eyes. And the internet is like an amplification tool for that idea. So we talked already about the worst impulses of human behavior that are amplified. Let's just walk through these lists of sins in the Bible. And I highlighted these ones that particularly jump out, but really I'd say well beyond this, we can see these things with the internet. But in 1 Corinthians chapter 6, verses 9 and 10, Paul says, "Know ye not that the unrighteous shall not inherit the kingdom of God? Be not deceived, neither fornicators, nor idolaters, nor adulterers, nor effeminate, nor abusers of themselves with mankind, nor thieves, nor covetous, nor drunkards, nor revilers, nor extortioners shall inherit the kingdom of God." I at least should have added effeminate, abusers of mankind, and extortioners to those yellows, thieves as well, as the internet has become a hotbed of those things also. But we see here these lists, and what these lists remind us is that, number one, these things have always been around, right? Paul is writing, there's no internet then, and yet there's still fornicators and idolaters and adulterers, and men are going to find a way to sin, and they are going to sin. But what happens when you have a tool that connects you to everyone in the world? There was a time in the Scriptures when the entire world was connected communicatively in an appreciable way. In the generations following the flood, God said to man that they were to replenish the earth, and man said, let's stay together. And let's stay together lest we be divided. So they stayed together, and the Bible says they built a tower. And do you remember what God said there? It says, the whole earth was of one language, Genesis 11, verse 1, and of one speech. And it came to pass as they journeyed from the east that they found a plain in the land of Shinar, and they dwelt there. And they said to one another, go to, let us make brick and burn them thoroughly. And they had brick for stone, and slime they had for mortar. And they said, go to, let us build us a city and a tower whose top may reach unto heaven. And let us make us a name, lest we be scattered abroad upon the face of the whole earth. And the Lord came down to see the city and the tower which the children of men builded. And the Lord said, behold, the people is one, and they have all one language, and this they begin to do. And now nothing will be restrained from them which they have imagined to do. So in that they were a people who were one, and their speech was one. We don't know in the pre-Diluvian age whether or not there were multiple languages. There's nothing that says there were multiple languages in the pre-flood era. However, we would imagine that because the only ones that came through it were Shem, Ham, Japheth, and Noah, that they all spoke the same language. And so everyone had the same language at this time. And God says that because they are one people and they have one language, that there is nothing that will be restrained from them which they have imagined to do. Now, when you see the words not restrained and imagination in the Bible, what are they normally connected with? I know that's a weird question, but see if you can connect the dots. Not restrained and imagination. Romans 1, a good example. Every man does that which is right in their own eyes, right? That sort of idea. Romans 1, judges. The times where everyone does according to their own imagination. Everyone is doing what is right in their own eyes. And so God went down and he confounded the languages because he said, it's not that unity in itself is a bad thing, but that when man comes together, he unifies himself against God. He unifies himself around the wrong things. And so as the world gets so much smaller because of the internet, wonderful things, right? You can take your phone and you can go to another language and you can speak your language into the phone and then it'll immediately translate it into the receptor language and you can have a conversation back and forth. and you can take your credit card and you can go to another country and you can use that credit card there and it translates all the currencies and everything. It exchanges the currencies and all is well and you can function just fine. Working toward a time where, well, maybe there'll all be one language. Maybe there'll all be one currency. We would imagine that one is pretty clear from future scriptures. Or at least there'll be a final gatekeeper, right, of buying and selling, whether the currencies are all the same or not. And so the internet becomes this place where the world has become very, very small, where everybody can talk to everyone else, thus everyone can interact with everyone else. And it's kind of, as we said last time, that there may be some person who is struggling with a sin or a thought, and that thought is quite out of bounds morally, and they are in a place where everyone else around them is relatively morally adjusted, and so they say, well, I need to fight this, I need to work through this, and I need to get to the other side of it. But now a person has some sort of weird moral idea, and they say, am I the only one? And then they get online and they realize, nope, I'm not the only one. And so their thoughts, much rather than being brought to a place where they are morally guided, they are instead encouraged in the confusion, the perversion, whatever it might be. They're said this is normal. And though it might be a very, very small movement of people that would think this way, relatively speaking, when that small movement of people can all find each other around the world, well, in a world of whatever we have now, 8 billion people or whatever it is, even a 1% of that population is going to be quite significant if everyone can find each other. And so then we find ourselves in a place where, with information abounding, the ability for people to indulge their worst impulses is just it's just great, very easy. The Galatians 5 list. The works of the flesh are manifest, which are these: adultery, fornication, uncleanness, lasciviousness, idolatry, witchcraft, hatred, variance, emulations, wrath, strife, seditions, heresies, envyings, all of those most certainly. Murders, a little harder to do online as a general rule, except for the hating your brother in your heart, so I guess we could add that. There's plenty of that online. Drunkenness, revelings, and such like. Of the which I tell you before, as I have also told you in time past, that they which do such things shall not inherit the kingdom of God. We see again sexual sins on this list. We also see a strong emphasis in this list on emotional sins. Variance, emulations, wrath, strife, seditions. The danger is not even from just getting angry at someone and saying nasty things online, which is pretty common. But even the danger of getting involved in variance and strife and seditions. One of the things about social media in particular is trolling. Can somebody give me a definition of trolling? Is anyone here internet savvy enough to tell me what it is to be a troll online? Sarah?
Putting unkind comments regularly on somebody else's.
For what reason? What's the general?
Stir up trouble.
There you go. Yep. So generally it's unkind comments. It may not be unkind comments. It may be comments of ignorance or whatever, but you're putting comments maybe that usually that you don't even believe as a means by which to stir up trouble, to cause other people to get angry, to light the match and then watch it burn, right? And that idea is very, very common online as well. People that just love to watch it burn. So they'll go into a place where they know they're going to have people of a certain tendency. They blow that place up with some sort of thought or whatever it might be, and then they just watch it. They watch it burn. They try to embarrass people. They try to anger people. They try to confuse people. And the thing is that all these people that are angry at this troll, and he doesn't care, because they spend all of their time trying to convince this guy, and he may not even believe what he says he's believing. See, because you don't know anything about these people. So then at best, it just becomes a time waste. You're engaging with someone, you're angry at them, it's causing your mood to change, it's causing you to be frustrated, and they may just be sitting there saying, I don't even have a dog in this fight, I'm just trying to stir up trouble. And all of that happens all the time. And that doesn't even account for the fact that there's a lot of these interactions on social media that are bots. In other words, they're just computers that have been programmed to respond in certain ways. They're not even people on the other end. And this happens quite a bit in politics and in geopolitics. So our geopolitical enemies, Russia and China, will program bots. They'll get social media accounts, and then they'll program them to affirm or deny something. So some politician gives a speech, and they'll have all of their bots saying the exact same thing, saying, this is wrong, this is wrong, this is wrong. And then you get on and you say, oh, wow, the consensus is this is wrong. So that must mean this is wrong. Except that the consensus is among a bunch of computers that were programmed by our geopolitical enemies. You don't even know if there are humans on the other end of those comments. You might be engaging with a computer, not even with a human. All of these things are things, but what's it doing to you? And much less if you're engaging with if you are the troll, right? If you are but it's putting you at odds. It's making you fall into attacks upon people's character. It's making you angry. It's causing you to stir up strife. Sarah?
What was lascivious again? Base instincts?
Yeah. The idea of lasciviousness. Yes, it's a following your base primal urges and instincts. Unrestrained, following unrestrained urges. Yep. So for adultery, fornication, uncleanness, lasciviousness, all of those are connected to sexual sin. And we are not ignorant at this point of the capacity, the depth of sexual sin on the internet, and all of it. While there are paywalls for everything, because the whole point of pornography online and everything else online is to make money, just like the crack dealer, or the meth dealer, or the fentanyl dealer, who is more than willing to give people who are not regular users free drugs. And why are they willing to give? These drugs are expensive. Why would they be willing to give these people free drugs?
They know they won't want.
Because they know that they'll get addicted, and as soon as they're addicted, they've got a customer for life, right? You get someone hooked, and you've got a customer for life. So pornography is everywhere. And then a person finds a certain aspect of pornography that they're particularly interested in, and then they go looking for that, and it's behind the paywalls, and now they're paying money. It's the same with gambling, and it's the same with that online as well. So we see the sexual sins, we see idolatry. Obviously, social media has changed the way that we look at people, celebrities, politicians, even preachers. A preacher who may have just been his little preacher, little corner of the world doing his thing, then blows up and becomes someone big. And even that can bring about an idolatry. Witchcraft, more learning about it than necessarily engaged in it online. Hatred, variance, emulations, wrath, strife, seditions. Those are all very much so emotional sins. And then heresies, envyings, murders, drunkenness, revelings kind of rounds out that list. Sarah?
Well, and on the witchcraft note, I know we don't deal with it as much because we're homeschooled, but in the public schools, there's resources when they talk about witchcraft, or when they looked at like Harry Potter, or something like that. They said, you're curious, go to these websites. And those websites were people
Right.
that engage with the students and try to pull them into the occult. And that was encouraged by teachers in the public schools, and that's something parents aren't aware of. And it's just, oh, if you're curious about this, here's where you can learn more. Well, it's not just where you can learn more, it's entering into it.
Right. Yeah, and that would be an area, well, and with any of these things, right? The curious learn more, and websites that can connect people to anything, certainly. As far as information is concerned, anything can be found. Effectively, the entirety of the world's knowledge has been condensed into our pockets. So, again, the principles here that we are thinking through are to help us understand the ways in which the internet can be used to magnify the very things that are what we would call our enemies in this life. Ephesians 5 and 6. For this ye know that no whoremonger, nor unclean person, nor covetous man who is an idolater hath any inheritance in the kingdom of Christ and of God. Let no man deceive you with vain words, for because of these things cometh the wrath of God upon the children of disobedience. So all of these have talked about the kingdom of God, the fact that the wrath of God comes upon those that live in this way. And the essence of this is Paul saying and exhorting in all of these, if these are the things for which the wrath of God comes upon the children of disobedience, if these are the things that displease the Lord, if these are the things that brought down Sodom and Gomorrah, if these are the things that have heaped judgment upon judgment on the heads of men, if these are the things that God hates, then we as believers ought not be living in those things, because in doing so, we lose our inheritance. We lose our rewards. We don't lose the kingdom, but we lose our rewards. So then, if the internet is a place where these things proliferate, then we need to be careful, thoughtful. First Timothy chapter 4, verses 1 through 3. Now the Spirit speaketh expressly that in the latter times some shall depart from the faith, giving heed to seducing spirits and doctrines of devils, speaking lies and hypocrisy, having their conscience seared with a hot iron, forbidding to marry and commanding to abstain from meats, which God hath created to be received with thanksgiving of them which believe and know the truth. Now we start to get into the spiritual side of things, the danger on the spiritual side. We've talked already about the occult a little bit. We've also talked about the ability for heresy to spread. Heresy was one of those things that we saw in a previous list, in our Galatians list. But as it speaks of those that give heed to seducing spirits and doctrines of devils, the capacity for the internet to be the place for people to get down those rabbit holes of false ideas that can grip you and get a hold of you and take you to a place of danger rather than a place of safety. And while, again, we recognize that the internet can also be that place where that person who knows nothing can find sound doctrine, if you've got a room of someone preaching sound doctrine and in that same room someone preaching the ideas of seducing spirits, doctrines of devils, tickling people's ears, so as the lies proliferate, the internet becomes the place where those lies can really take a hold. So we have to be careful spiritually as well. 2 Timothy 3, this know also that in the last days perilous times shall come, for men shall be lovers of their own selves, covetous, boasters, proud, blasphemers, disobedient to parents, unthankful, unholy, without natural affection, truce breakers, false accusers, incontinent, fierce, despisers of those that are good, traitors, heady, high-minded, lovers of pleasures more than lovers of God, having a form of godliness but denying the power thereof, from such turn away. All of those things can proliferate in an internet setting, can be found. and again, this is not to minimize the fact that those are found in other places. What we are recognizing is that on those other places, they're not necessarily coming into your home. You can fill your bookshelf with the right kind of books. You can fill your movie shelf with the right kind of movies. But then if you are not guarding social media, if you are not guarding internet access, then the pure amount of information, seduction, confusion that can be found through those sources is well beyond anything that a dangerous book in a library would pose to your children or to you. Particularly through the medium of audio-visual, of course, which YouTube has plenty of, and social media through TikTok, Instagram, Snapchat. Let's see. I think we kind of have that. So what I'd like to do then with these principles, I put down some more slides, but they didn't transfer over. The next thing I was going to transition into, related to the principles, is what are the principles that the Scripture has to say about the areas of protection from these things? What are the principles that undergird why it is we ought to be pursuing, taking time to think through how the internet works so that we can protect ourselves on it? I'll open it up since I don't have the slides. Sarah, was that a hand?
I was thinking of the passage, whatsoever things are true, noble, just, lovely, and good report, if there be any virtue, think on these things.
Good. That's Philippians 4, right? Finally, brethren, whatsoever things are true, whatsoever things are honest, whatsoever things are just, whatsoever things are pure, whatsoever things are lovely, whatsoever things are of good report, if there be any virtue, if there be any praise, think on these things, those things which ye have both learned and received and heard and seen in me do, and the God of peace shall be with you. So we are called to allow our minds to be consumed with these things. Now, let me ask you this. How can the internet help us do this? Dan?
Listening to some good podcasts.
Yeah. Preaching, teaching, music, right? All of those things that you have access to online that are fantastic. You can, even good quality, godly Christian music, you could stream it for days on end without hearing the same song twice. And then you add to that podcasts, and you add to that just sermons. And what a wonderful thing that you can even... You have such a treasure trove of recordings. One of my mentors from afar, a man I never met but was a real influence in my life, Louis Perry Chafer. And of course, the guy founded Dallas Theological in the early 1900s, and he's well passed away by now. But I do have a singular set of recordings of that man teaching. And it's an honor to be able to listen to him teach, and it's all crackly and awful because it was probably recorded in the 50s or 60s or something. But what a blessing it is that that's there, and that I could find it, and that from my own home I can access it. I'm reading a book right now by Increase Mather. That's the father of Cotton Mather, the Puritan preacher back in the 1600s. And Increase Mather was the president of Harvard and wrote some books. Those books are not easy to find nowadays. It's not like you're just going to go into a library and find it. You're not going to go on Amazon and find it. You're going to have to go to Harvard's library and find the edition that he actually wrote back in the day. And I don't have access to Harvard's library, at least in person. But now I can download that book off of Project Gutenberg, which has which is a website that has combined or compiled all of the out-of-copyright literature in the world into a singular source. So anything that's 100 years or older is going to be very easy. As long as there's still a copy of it somewhere, Gutenberg or Google Books or someone will have it. And I can download a PDF of it, and I can learn from that man. So the internet has opened up an opportunity for me to connect to resources like never before. But in that, we've already talked about the nature of the internet, as a predatorial force, it is good to use the internet, but as a predatorial force, we must understand it well enough to at least be able to navigate it and likely put protections in place. And that does not just mean firewalls and filters. That means time. That means guarding my time on the internet. Consumption. Who I'm interacting with and what I'm allowing them to draw me into as far as engagement. So you don't start engaging in wrath and strife and seditions and emulations. So that you don't start becoming a troll. So that you don't start thinking that an argument, that you just interact to win arguments, tear people down, and then walk away. There's nothing in that that's good for the soul. There's nothing in that helps us with Philippians 4:8 living. And so the intent of this series is not to tell you to avoid the internet. The intent is to help you understand its dangers, and then, of course, to help you understand, most of us know the dangers, help us understand how to harness it. But the part that I can only do in part, I can teach you all this stuff, and we can get you set up with filters and everything else. The part I can't help you with, from a technical sense, I can only point the way, is the spiritual part. Where we open our Bibles and we say, Philippians 4 verse 8 means more to me than social media following. Philippians 4 verse 8 means more to me than instant gratification, right? As it relates to the various aspects of internet culture. Other verses that would help govern us in relation to internet that come to mind. I think of Job, where he says that I've made a covenant with my eyes. It's one that we often use, men, to talk about the nature of our interactions with the world around us and decency and immodesty and the like. I've made a covenant with my eyes. Why then should I look upon a maid? Recognizing that there must be an internal governance, self-governance, if I am going to be able to navigate this world, and all the more so online. Joel.
It says all things are lawful, not all things are beneficial.
Good.
Just like if you draw the line for watching TV or something, where people say there's lots of good shows, but there's enough bad news to draw the line.
Yeah, good. So twice in 1 Corinthians, all things are lawful, but all things are not beneficial, or all things are not expedient in our King James. And so we recognize that even though the internet is a place that we have the right to go, and there's a lot of benefit there, that doesn't mean that everything there is going to be beneficial. And what's interesting, there's two times that Paul says that all things are lawful, but all things are not expedient. All things are lawful, but all things edify not. So the first time it's about me doing things as it relates to my brother. So I can do that, but in doing so, it's not expedient. It doesn't edify my brother, so I'm not going to do it, even though I have the liberty to. The second time, it's all things are lawful, but all things are not expedient. All things are lawful, but I will not be brought under the power of any. And that one is maybe even more so, well, both of them are very, very valuable from an internet culture. From a social media aspect, it's the all things don't edify. Just because you can do it, because you're just in front of a keyboard and you're anonymous online, that doesn't mean you should. Because you might be tearing someone down. You might be really messing with someone. Let's say you aren't the one who's going to walk away from the computer and just be absolutely torn up all day by the interactions that you had and frustrated and brought low. Okay, so that's not you, but what happens if you're a part of that for someone else? What happens if you're one of the digital mobs that jumps on someone because they made a mistake or whatever it might be, and you're a part of that digital mob, and that person who just got digitally attacked is now absolutely confused and frustrated in their life because we've contributed to this. And you say, well, maybe they shouldn't let things bother them so much. Maybe they shouldn't. Maybe we shouldn't either, but that doesn't mean we don't. So we want to be careful with the edification, but we also want to be careful that things don't have power over us. Paul says, owe no man anything but to love one another, to not allow those things to control us. Good. Any other verses come to mind? All right, well then let's go ahead and work just very briefly. We'll just do an introduction into the internet, understanding the internet. And I'm just going to kind of begin walking you through this. We'll probably go through it again, and then we'll go through it piece by piece. So we'll see this chart at least next week as well. So when you're dealing with the internet, we have what are called terminals. These are the devices that connect to the internet. There's an irony to the way, there's a cyclical nature to technology. Remember cell phones, they started out really, really big, right? Huge things, like really big, flip down and whatnot. And then they got really, really small. And they were pushing to get them as small as possible. And then they got really, really big again, right? And in a different way. Now we have these massive bricks in our pockets that are about the same footprint as those old ones. They're not as thick anymore as those old ones, but their footprint is just as big as those old bricks. Only, of course, they do an awful lot more than they used to do, right? So, and that often happens. That has happened with computers as well. It used to be back in the days when computers were first kind of being connected to one another, that you had this idea of client and server, or terminals. So everyone that wanted to use a computer would come to a screen and a keyboard. And that would not actually be the computer. It would be connected to a computer that was the size of this room. And that would be the computer. And then they would be connected with a screen and a keyboard somewhere else. And then after that, because computers got a lot more powerful, we went to a personal computer model. And the personal computer model was everything that you need is right in the box you have. And you don't need to have a connection to a much bigger machine to do what you want to do. Well, the irony is we're back to the client-server model again, to the terminal model, where now we have this little box, and that box doesn't actually, for most people, need to do much. You only need a computer powerful enough to open a browser. And then everything that you're doing is online. There's a good number of people now, they don't use Microsoft Word on their computer anymore. They use Word online, or Google's Office Suite online. They open a browser when they want to type a letter. They open a browser when they want to make a PowerPoint presentation. They don't open a program on their computer anymore. So we're back to this world where actually our computers are becoming just very, very low-powered terminals to access much more powerful machines farther away from us. And I just saw this week, Windows, Microsoft is putting out a new application for Windows called Windows. And it's an application that you run in Windows where you can actually run Windows through a browser, another Windows machine through your browser. So you can have, I could have my machine at home, and I could just open up a browser on my Android tablet and run my Windows computer at home so that I could use its video card, which is significantly more powerful than my tablet can have. And I can use its processor, which is significantly more powerful than this processor. But I can run it through a browser, and the program can run on this machine through a browser. This is the idea. So when we're talking about the internet, we're talking about some terminal. There are laptops, there are PCs, there are smartphones. Smartphone is the one that we all interact with most regularly. There are also other devices that we'll talk about, Internet of Things devices. Refrigerators that are connected to the internet, toasters that are connected to the internet, coffee machines that are connected to the internet. Everything is connected to the internet today. And of course you have alarm systems, and you have water leak sensors, and you have thermostats, our thermostats. We have a smart thermostat downstairs, but we don't have the internet here, so when the power blinks, we lose our date and time. But the idea of a smart thermostat, so that in theory we could control that from afar. Very interesting, very, very good. All of those things, though, are connecting to the internet. And they connect through two different elements, the hardware and the software. Again, I'll explain these later. And in the software, you have things like browsers, hardware, you have lines and Wi-Fi and all of those. And they go through a router of some sort. So that when you say www.legacybaptistchurch.net in your browser, there's a web address that's going into a router, and there will be other things there too, a modem which connects you to your internet service provider. And then from there, it's going to your internet service provider, and your internet service provider is going to then take that, and it's going to send that to what's called a domain name system. And there, it's going to convert the web address, www.legacybaptistchurch.net, to a IP address, 46.28.42.55. And that is actually the IP address for legacybaptistchurch.net. So legacybaptistchurch.net is it's lines of code that are running on a server. And that server is somewhere in I don't know where. And so when I say legacybaptistchurch.net, see, legacybaptistchurch.net doesn't mean anything. But legacybaptistchurch.net is registered with a domain name service. And that domain name service has legacybaptistchurch.net in their directory, and it's connected to 46.28.42.55. And then once it changes to that, then it's able to send it to that server wherever it is in the world. I think it's in the United States. It's supposed to be in the United States. I don't know if it is in the United States. Could be anywhere in the world. And then when the server receives that request, then it will get those lines of code and it will send them back to my modem and then to my router and then to the browser that is able to then interpret that data and then present it to me on my terminal in some fashion that makes sense. And all of that happens in milliseconds. It's incredible. Technology is just incredible. So, there are places that we can protect ourselves. We recognize that the internet has dangers, that those dangers are very real. We want to stop those dangers that have a propensity to look for us without our consent. I can't do anything if my children are determined to do wrong. They're going to find a way, whether that's through the internet or whether that's through something, they're going to find a way to indulge in that sin. That's why we have to train and we have to pray and we have to spiritually discipline. But what we want to do is we want to help our children and ourselves avoid the pitfalls. On the software end of things, we can do certain things. I can run an individual program on any piece of individual terminal, and that program can check on things, block things, and the like. But here's the problem. If let's say I've got 6 terminals in my house. I've got a laptop, I've got 2 laptops, a desktop, and I've got 3 phones. How do I block all of them? Do I need different software? Well, maybe a different software for the phone and for the computer because they're different operating systems. Does a service that I'm going to pay handle all of those operating systems? At what cost? Literally the cost that it would be, X number of dollars per month to subscribe to some service, setting it up, and then how secure is it, or are there ways around it? What I'm going to advocate for in the weeks is that there is a real value in software-based protections. But in all honesty, the best places to protect yourself are right here, at the router and firewall and modem, depending on, we'll talk about the differences, and right here, your DNS server. Those are the 2 places that are going to be the most effective. And the reason is this. If I've got blocks on my router, then as long as someone is connected to my network at home, everything has to go through it. My phone has to go through it. My computer has to go through it. Someone else's computer that comes to my home has to go through it. My toaster has to go through it. which means every single thing in my home is protected. And there's privacy and security implications to that as well. Now, what that doesn't do is that doesn't help on my cell phone when I leave the house, and that's where we'd have to talk about other protections as it relates to on-phone protections if I want those protections. But then there's things that a parent could do to lock some of those things down and the like. And then DNS server. So the DNS server is what connects web address to IP address, Internet Protocol address, those are the numbers, and then sends that off. There are multiple DNS services that one can use. There's a couple of them that are specifically made to be able to be filtering services, to where I can, again, set it up even on a terminal on my phone, to where if it's going to connect through the software to whatever modem, and on my phone that would be the towers for Verizon or AT&T or whoever, and then that's the internet service provider, and then to this DNS. And if I'm trying to, if there's a DNS server that's dangerous, or if there's an IP address that's dangerous, because it has pornography or it's social media or whatever, the DNS service will say, I'm sorry, your IP of your device is blacklisted from all of these websites. You may not go to them. And then it says, sorry, no, can't do that. Once again, it has nothing to do with the device itself. Anything I use on the device. You can protect one browser, but what if they use another browser? If they use another browser, it's still protected, because it still has to go through that DNS. Are there ways around these things too? Of course there are. With both of these, the great weakness is what's called VPNs. A VPN is a virtual private network. What a VPN does is it encrypts all of the traffic, so that, and the DNS service cannot read what it's asking for. It can only read what it sees. So, it gets decrypted on the other end, but what it particularly does, that doesn't help with DNS. The encrypted traffic means the router can't read it, which means it doesn't know where it's going. The DNS will see the traffic because you have to ask for the web address, but what the VPN does is it actually changes your IP address, so that the DNS server says, oh, this IP address is not blocked, I can let it have whatever it wants. So those are some of those dangers, and we'll talk through some of the ways to mitigate those as well. Again, at the end of the day, there's always a way around things. But what we're not trying to do here is we're not trying to lock things down and say this is foolproof. What we're trying to do is keep us and our children safe from accidents, predatorial internet elements, and then those times of weakness, where we just fall into a self-destructive cycle. And a great deal of that will be able to be done through what we're going to talk about in these next weeks. So next week, we'll actually get into the nitty-gritty of each one of these. We'll talk about them together. And then after that, we'll talk about the ways that we can specifically protect ourselves, some of the strategies, the software, the hardware, and then you, with that knowledge in hand, will be able to then be equipped to go out and get what you need to protect yourself and your home.